Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests who are joining us today. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat now and tell us where you're joining us from? I welcome everyone into our worship service by inviting you to repeat our first church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's go now to our beloved sanctuary to light the chalice, which is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. We want to introduce you now to our new members who just finished our Journey to Membership class this week and are covenanting with our congregation during in-person worship this morning. So go ahead and welcome them in the chat now, as you were once welcome yourself, and as we share their photos with you. Here they are.
The word beauty immediately conjures up some ugly internal messages for me. Messages from advertisements and media I've consumed since I was a child taught me that as a woman in our society, I am more valuable if I look young. And now that I'm not as young, with laugh lines sprouting around my eyes, some unwanted hairs erupting on my chin, and this fairly new bulbous mole that rooted itself on the right side of my nose a few years ago, it's been an uphill battle to connect with a healthy idea of physical beauty. I know this could sound somewhat ridiculous. I am 43 years old, and I have high hopes to live until at least 97, so I'm not even halfway there. But the dominant culture is strong, and the big business of the beauty industry only tells me that I'm not enough in my natural aging body, that I should keep chasing unattainable youth and pay corporations large sums of money to try to get it. Luckily, the distorted mirror I've inherited from our capitalist, misogynist culture isn't the only reflection I have of myself. A few years ago, one of my daughters who loves to create art made a portrait of me on a plain white piece of paper with a thin black marker. It was a contour line drawing with the outlines of my facial features in bold black. I can still see the look of excitement in her eyes as she showed it to me. She must have been 5 years old at the time, and very quietly, in that humble and nervous way people have when we are proud of something, she said, "Look, I worked really hard on this part." She pointed to the circle she had drawn by the triangular nose on the paper, and then she pointed to my actual face. The part of her drawing she loved the most was that mole I had been trying to hide behind thick glasses. The new mole was the star of the portrait, clearly seen by my daughter, clearly seen and clearly loved. This spring break, 2 or 3 years since the moment with the portrait, I was holding hands with her in the Art Institute of Chicago. Now 8 years old, she was gripping my palm tightly, wanting to stay close to mom, perhaps in such a big place and in such a big crowd, or maybe squeezing a little harder because it was just so exciting. Her hands were cold because she had forgotten her mittens, but even though we were now inside, she was still wearing her brand new earmuffs, the ones shaped like cartoon pineapples, protruding from either side of her head. Something about being there with her amidst the paintings of famous artists made me recall the portrait she drew of me years earlier. My everyday face, aging and asymmetrical, not beautiful by the beauty industry standards, was made beautiful by her loving artist eye and careful hand. Just like an everyday stack of wheat at the end of summer was rendered beautiful by Claude Monet in 1891. A dead cow's skull was uplifted into a celebration in a painting by Georgia O'Keeffe in 1931. Holding hands with her, I noticed that artist after artist in the museum took time to see the everyday, to notice the beauty of normal life and even death pulsing through each moment. They noticed beauty and documented it. I'm thankful my daughter has that impulse too. I'm not an artist, so what can I give back to my daughter to return the gift she has given me? This reminder that I am ephemeral, I am always changing. How can I thank her for teaching me to reject being boxed in by a scarcity model of beauty and instead welcome the new changes aging brings to my physical and emotional self, wrinkles, hairs, moles, and all. I can embrace the beauty of my connection with her in the loving reflection she shows me instead of trying to hide the parts of myself that are uncomfortable or imperfect. I can also notice the beauty in the small, everyday moments life offers. Rather than striving for something outside of myself in our shared experience, I can be present with her, like there in the museum, taking a moment to see her. I couldn't help but return the squeeze of her chilly hand and lean awkwardly over her earmuffs to kiss the top of her curls. Her pineapple-shaped earmuffs are etched in my brain if I slow down enough to see them. A little too big for her small face, crookedly placed atop her tangly hair. Those earmuffs look indescribably beautiful to me.
In the novel, The Overstory by Richard Powers, one of the main characters is a professor at the University of Madison who studies plants. Powers writes, "It's a miracle," Dr. Pat Westerford tells her students. "It's a miracle photosynthesis, a feat of chemical engineering underpinning creation's entire cathedral. All the razzmatazz of life on earth is a free rider on that mind-boggling magic act. The secret of life? Plants eat light and water and air, and the stored energy goes on to make and do all things." She leads her charges into the inner sanctum of the mystery. Hundreds of chlorophyll molecules assemble into antenna complexes. Countless such antenna arrays form up into thycaloid discs. Stacks of these discs align in a single chloroplast. Up to 100 of those such solar-powered factories power a single plant cell. Millions of cells shape a single leaf, and a million leaves rustle up a single glorious ginkgo. Too many zeros. Their eyes glaze over. She must usher them back over the line between numbness and awe. So she tries again. Billions of years ago, a single fluke, self-copying cell learned how to turn a barren ball of poison gas into this peopled garden. And everything that you hope, fear, and love became possible. Billions of years ago, a single cell learned how to turn a barren ball of gas into this peopled garden, and everything you hope, fear, and love became possible. Awe. It's a powerful emotion. It brings us up out of ourselves and into the larger world. According to psychologists Dasher Kelter and Jonathan Haidt, human beings feel awe in responses to perceived vastness, which is, quote, anything that is experienced as being much larger than the self or the self's ordinary level of experience, unquote. So it doesn't have to be physically large. It could be numerically or conceptually vast, like millions of tiny chlorophyll cells or billions of years in the making of your life. Awe makes us more connected, pro-social people. It decreases our self-importance and it increases our connection to others and the world. It decreases our sense of urgency and our sense of scarcity, and it increases our sense of spaciousness and generosity. According to the Greater Good Science Center's 2018 white paper on awe, quote, one study found that people induced to feel awe agreed more strongly with statements suggesting that time is plentiful and expansive than did people induced to feel happiness. Other experiments in the study found that when people who felt awe experienced this expanded perception of time, They were more willing than other people to volunteer their time to help others, to prefer experiential purchases over material ones, and to report greater satisfaction with their lives. Awe is good for us, and it's good for the world. It increases our satisfaction with life and boosts our mood, and it makes us more open, more generous people willing to invest in the common good. One of the ways we can access awe is by cultivating beauty. There's a particular kind of awe that's primarily aesthetic. It's called beauty-based awe, and it can be elicited by nature, by people, and by art. Cause for awe abounds in the beauty all around us, but it is up to us to notice it. There's breathtaking beauty everywhere, from the mole on Marisa's nose to the glorious ginkgo to Monet's wheat stacks, but we have to be willing to take a breath and witness it. So how do we do that? Especially in these difficult days of death culture and cruelty, how do we usher ourselves back over the line between numbness and awe? My colleague, Unitarian Universalist minister Meg Riley, wrote recently about how she returned to connection with the world when she had been using anxiety as a blockade against its horrors. When she was struggling in her prayer life one morning, she remembered someone from her ministry with the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship, an imprisoned person who was part of that congregation. Reverend Riley writes, "We were offering a class called Full Spectrum Joy, developed for free world people and adapted for imprisoned people by Amanda L. Aikman. The premise of the class was that you engage in a practice that leads to more joy using each color of the rainbow as a reminder. The practice for green was to find something alive and pay attention to it. People who took the class would write their comments, so we got to see what they were learning and sharing. One of the people wrote about green that he was in solitary confinement with no window, so he thought that there was nothing alive in his cell. But then he saw an ant on the floor. He spent time lying on the floor studying that ant, and indeed, he felt more joy. Reverend Riley remembered this man's experience that morning in prayer when she felt as if she was just surrounded by death culture and that nothing was alive. She had been protecting herself from the pain of the world by using her own anxiety as a weird, miserable flotation device in a sea of perceived evil. With this man's wisdom as her guide, she came back to her practice of noticing life and appreciating the joy of its small, everyday glories. She wrote, "If that man could find something alive, how preposterous that I tell myself I cannot." It's possible to nurture our connection to beauty, to the glory of aliveness through the smallest window, even through the body of an ant. Part of the work is cultivation, not just of beauty, but of our attention to it. What helps you pay attention to the beauty around you every day? What helps you slow down the rush of doing to allow your mind to notice the drama and the glory of everyday life unfolding in your midst? How might you cultivate the kind of attention that would be able to derive joy from the life of an ant? I love drinking beauty in scales, scales like small and medium and large. On a beauty walk, I try to notice something at each level. I enjoy it more when I don't look, but just expand my attention out wide, feeling the landscape's edges. And then I just notice whatever pops out at me. Sometimes it's a tiny white mushroom bloom at the end of a dead, wet branch. Sometimes it's the new magnolia buds pinking out from a tree. I always love the fanning fractals of bare branches against a clean blue sky. And my extra large scale is usually just sky itself, or the line between lake and sky, or the way that they mirror each other, reflecting blue and gray in waves. You can take a beauty walk in the city too, or even a beauty journey in your home. There are places of beauty you can see from your bed, from a slice of sky out the window to the crack that runs jagged along the ceiling, marking time and Earth's movement and the work of human hands. The city's beauty might be in rust patterns on the sidewalk, or an old fire hydrant, or the lines on your neighbor's face. Beauty is about noticing what is wherever you are. Beauty connects us with awe and brings our small self into connection with something so much larger. Beauty is not a commodity to be sold to us. It's not a standard of perfection based on supremacy systems. Beauty is a resource for resistance to those systems, a disruptor that returns us to our true selves and also elevates us up beyond them into the interbeing of all things. Beauty reminds us of what really matters, of what is true, what is alive, and what nourishes us for the work of fighting for life. Beauty helps us survive. Another Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Nancy MacDonald Ladd, tells a story about a woman that she knew in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Reverend Ladd writes, "The woman was a social worker. She spent her days helping troubled kids find a way, and her weekends walking labyrinths, and her Sundays wearing an apron at the Unitarian Church, filling the coffee pots for her fellow searchers." One day, Reverend Ladd was talking with this woman about her early life, her childhood that was marked by poverty and hunger and regular abuse and a number of forms at the hands of her own father. As they talked, the woman kept saying those wise things that social workers say about the generational perpetuation of abuse, the fact that the cycle of suffering, once started, can catch a whole family system in its power unless it's somehow averted. She told Reverend Ladd that her father was himself the product of generational and systemic abuse. He had been beaten and belittled his whole life, and that pattern continued and was passed on to her, a horrible inheritance from generations ago. And though this woman separated herself from him. He never was able to see what he was doing or come out from underneath that horrible cloud. And while she didn't forgive him exactly, she was able to place his abuse within a broader complex context of compounding tragedy. Reverend Ladd asked her, how? How did she have the capacity to see it that way and to break the cycle of suffering? And the woman gave Reverend Ladd a response she said that she has never forgotten. The woman said, I can still see beauty, and he can't. I can still see beauty, and he can't. Beauty can save us. This woman, this social worker, this Unitarian Universalist, this tender human, transformed a cycle of violence spanning generations by harnessing the power of beauty. Through noticing, through cultivating beauty, and then using it as fuel to survive, as energy to get through another day, as reason enough, power enough to turn around and create more beauty in the world. The woman became a social worker. She became someone who spent her days helping troubled kids find their way. She became someone who spent her weekends in spiritual practice, walking the labyrinth. She became someone who spent her Sundays at a Unitarian Universalist church like ours, pouring coffee for folks like you. She used her capacity to see beauty, to cultivate it in her own life and in the world. Not only did she stop the cycle of violence in her family, she turned her life into a seed bed for beauty. A single cell, 1 billion years ago, learned how to turn a barren ball of poison gas into this peopled garden. And everything you hope and fear and love became possible. It became possible for you to see beauty in an ant, in a mole, in photosynthesis, in the vastness of time and creation it took to arrive at this very moment, in people using the power of beauty to turn their whole lives into seedbeds of beauty. It became possible for you to do the same. May you cultivate some beauty today, friends, in your awareness, in your life, and in the world. May it be so. It has been a blessing to be together. May you go out from here nourished and renewed, and use that to choose to bless the world. Until we meet again, may you be held, may you be healed, may you be whole. Blessed be, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there.